Welcome to the online series of creative conversations produced by Arts Nexus, featuring practising arts makers from across far north Queensland, a place to explore the business of arts, the ups, the downs, where we get our inspiration from and what our aspirations are.
To begin the proceedings, I would like to call our wonderful President, January, to the stage.
I would like to acknowledge the custodians of the land that we're gathering on here today and pay our respects to the elders past and present, for they hold the memories, the stories, the culture and the hope of all First Nations peoples across the nation, our nation. I am the president of Arts Nexus. I could have got you here all under false pretences because my European name is actually Judith. But now I must welcome our guest speaker, Judith. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you. I would also like to acknowledge Yves Stafford, our founder, is in the room. Thank you, Yves. A staunch supporter of Arts Nexus and arts across the region, with an OAM for her work, so amazing. And definitely soon we will be launching our podcast channel. And so all of these conversations will be available, and at that point I really encourage you to share, like, pass on the message, because we want these conversations to live beyond tonight or the night that they're on. We know people can't always get to things and for different reasons or being in the region. Arts Nexus is in the business of making arts, and we take that really, really seriously, even though we like to have a lot of fun along the way. And, you know, it's hard to describe, but we've tried to nail it to arts, culture and creative industries across far north Queensland, across art form, across all experience levels. Okay, so I am very excited about tonight. Arts Nexus has been involved with festivals and festival makers, events and creative activities for many, many years, probably since our inception, would you say, Eve, 22 years ago? We were involved in things like the David Williams report that was done with the Cairns Regional Council as well, and we've been involved in a cultural tourism strategy that we're now taking forward with the environment land care groups as well. So, thank you, Australia Council. We've been here for the arts leaders, well, we keep calling it a retreat, but I think that's the wrong word. But we've been in residence and under the incredible tutorage of Judith. So I've been very privileged to get to know her better this year. I'd also like to thank Arts Queensland, because they really are supporting us and showing their incredible commitment to arts by supporting our program. But my personal interest is I've struggled for years to try and work out what is quintessentially Australian and how do we want to celebrate that. And there's been a lot of conversation about dates and changing them and how to do that, but I'm more interested in how we celebrate how we're Australian and how we share our history and acknowledge that and take that forward into the future. So be ready for a survey. It will come soon. But yeah, definitely that is a key element that underpins tonight. How do we move forward? And is the region the place to experiment with that? And could we maybe actually create what might become a tradition?
We're in conversation with a national innovator in leadership education and an executive level influencer in tourism and events. Judith McLean has extensive experience in the performing arts, currently in Cairns as the lead facilitator for the Australia Council for the Arts Cultural Leaders Program. She is much respected and admired mentor for the last 2 years' cohorts and of leaders, and this year those leaders include our own local local leaders, Melissa Robertson, and I think Justin Bishop is maybe also in the room or was intending to be. But we also have other leaders who've come for the program in the room, and so welcome to you all, and welcome the leader of the leaders, Judith McLean. Now, we also have somebody specially who couldn't make it tonight but has put the effort in to actually welcome his dear friend and colleague to the stage with us tonight. And so I would like to press play on an introduction from our local member for Cairns, Michael Healy, who's by way of further introduction.
Good evening, everybody. Firstly, for those of you that don't know me, my name's Michael Healy, and I have the great privilege of being the member for Cairns. First and foremostly, I want to say a very warm welcome to the members of Arts Nexus, and most importantly to Judith McLean. Judith, I'm really sorry I couldn't be there this evening. Unfortunately, I'm in Brisbane, your hometown, but I think it's absolutely terrific that our arts sector has somebody of your calibre and knowledge and wisdom in our city, talking about the importance of the arts. For those of you that don't know, Judith is overqualified in this position. She is across it and is enormously passionate, and has certainly contributed to my knowledge in the arts sector, which is really important for me. It's a really good time in Cairns. We're seeing some significant development take place, and this is even before we have the announcements about our international tourism hub. We've seen the regional council come out and identify a number of buildings in which they want to create an arts precinct. So there's a lot of very positive things that are happening. Coming from the tourism industry and being a tourism city, we recognise the importance. We know how that the arts sector enhances the quality of experience that our 2.9 million visitors get when they get here. But not only that, it really provides career opportunities, stable jobs, and a sense of culture, particularly for our Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander communities. So I'm really disappointed I couldn't be there. Have a really good night, and hopefully I'll get an invitation to attend your next gig. But thanks a lot, best wishes.
All right, so we're almost to the point where we're going to actually hear from Judith. I know a lot of you have met her on the way in, but I just do want to share that to clarify that you're Tourism and Events Queensland, TEQ, you're a director, and you're also the chair of the events committee. Sure. And then you also have other roles, which is you're the inaugural Arts in Education, or Arts Education for QUT. QUT, I thought so, I've got a misprint here. And you are also the Scholar in Residence at the QPAC, Queensland Performing Arts Centre. So, how on earth does a grocer's daughter from the small town of Bowen, population 10,500, how has she made her way to these esteemed positions and these influential places in the arts and cultural sector?
Thank you, Avril, and good evening, everyone. And could I, just before we begin, and I answer that, could I just acknowledge how wonderful it is to be on Gimoy country, I beg your pardon, and I want to acknowledge the President of Arts Nexus, January, and thank you. We had a really wonderful evening earlier, just at the end of last week. Velvet Eldred, who is, I believe, the Deputy Chair. Thank you, Velvet, and I'm very privileged to say that Velvet and I spent many years together when Velvet was a student and I was her teacher, so it's a lovely circle to come around. Can I also acknowledge Yves Stafford, and I was on the Australia Council in the 90s when you were battling and fighting, and what a warrior woman you are. So it's absolutely wonderful to meet you. Can I thank Melissa and the board of Arts Nexus for this very kind invitation. And Melissa has been just absolutely amazing. She's just done this intense course that I've put them through. And, you know, I was worried about her today and said, you can leave. And she said, no, I can't. I have a wonderful team and they will have it under control. So what a vote of confidence in the team. Can I also acknowledge two others of the Australia Council cohort who are here in the room today, from Sydney, Jiva, and if you get an opportunity to meet him, he's an extraordinary man, and my friend Effie, who's from Melbourne and does extraordinary work in a very new field, a caring field, and I know there's someone here who's interested in well-being. So this is Effie here in the front, and that person who's interested in well-being should talk to her. If I've forgotten anyone, I apologise. I see Sue Ellen there and people that I've known for many years. So, yes, I have a lot of titles, and I would like just to take a moment to say I'm here just as Judith McLean, Grocer's daughter from Bowen, and while I am on the board of TEQ and I am the chair of the $34 million that gets spent in events, these are my views, not necessarily the views of those organisations. I'm also on the Australia Council, just recently appointed to the Major Performing Arts Panel, and I've just been appointed to the board of Dance North in Townsville, and because they asked me, really. So, you know. Yeah, and my day job, the job that you asked me about, is truly an extraordinary job. So I'm appointed by the university as a professor in arts education, and I am seconded to QPAC, where I have a chair, and they call me the scholar in residence, and I'll be happy to answer questions about what that means as we go through. But to answer your question...
How did you get here?
Yeah. Well, Miss Bolton had a lot to do with it. So I don't know if you've ever been to Bowen. Can you put your hand up if you have? Great. All right. Well, I am Bowen through and through, you know, a Bowen mango, as people like to say. My dad really did have the corner store and worked incredibly hard, and my mum had 6 kids, and she was usually off her nut, you know, screaming at us because we were naughty kids. But she was an incredible mother, and they were incredible parents in that, for some reason, and I am the only academic in my family, I'm the only one to have gone to university. None of my siblings have. I might say that my 15 nieces and nephews all have, which is interesting and tells a story about Australia, doesn't it? Well, white Australia. I wouldn't... dare to speak for anyone except white Australia. But at an early age, I really loved language, and I don't think Mum ever read to us. I can't even remember. And I liked saying poems. I liked language. I liked the feel of it in my mouth. And so she took me to Miss Bolton, and you all know Bowen, and you know that it's a pretty... well, it's a pretty dry, windy place, really. And I'd go to Miss Bolton as a sort of 5-year-old, 6-year-old, and I would go into this place of wood-panelled walls. And she had a beautiful library, and we would read poetry together. And that one teacher really taught me as a 6-year-old that language was something to be savoured, that it was something to enjoy, to be playful with. And then my mother, bless her, drove me to Home Hill, to Ayr, to Townsville, to Proserpine, to Mackay, to go into a Stedfords. And I was a pretty terrible performer, I might say, but, you know, I would stand up there and give it a go. So those regional experiences that you people all provide were just so central for me as a woman 64 years ago, when I was in Bowen, and a school which sort of was a Catholic school I went to, and they really fostered it. So I was not disadvantaged by growing up in a regional centre. In fact, I think I was advantaged.
Well, that's very interesting. Now, before I go on with this question, I was wondering if I could just tilt you around a bit, because I think we're having a little struggle with the light on the face. I'll just check.
How's that?
That's much better, thank you. I think, Curtis?
Gee, you'd think I could find my light, wouldn't you?
I know. I wasn't going to say anything, Judith, but, you know. Look, that is really inspiring to hear about the one teacher and how much you remember her. I understand that. And is that what has also led you back into education? And is that where you are with your role and seconded to as the scholar in residence? I mean, how are you feeling about education yourself?
Well, that's a great question, and it's an age question. And for those young people in the audience, you wouldn't believe that 40 odd years ago, when you did Year 12, a series of things happened. I was working in the delicatessen as I did every school holidays, and my father came in with my senior results. And he had opened them. Can you imagine doing that to a kid today? He had opened them and he said to me, "Oh, you're really clever. We didn't know you were that clever. What are you going to be, a nurse or a teacher?" Put up your hand if you've heard that story before of women around my age, yeah? And so I did go into teaching. And I didn't love it. My first job was in Theodore, and I'd never been to the West before. And so I sort of, in my 20s, I played with whether or not I wanted to be a teacher. And then speech and drama and theatre came into schools, and I got to lead that. And I started to love teaching because it was the passion of teaching what I loved. And I really hadn't been trained for it. I'd done an undergraduate degree with some subjects in drama, but that was about as far as it could go. So I would say when I was about 30, I actually sort of understood that I had a vocation and that I had a passion and that I believed that it was a really noble calling. And I only taught in schools for a very short time before I went to the university, but I loved kids, I loved students, and I loved what you could achieve. So I've always had that passion to, if you take, educare, meaning to lead out, I've always had that passion. Although today, the word education is such a dirty, a sort of soiled word, really, and we tend to use the word learning in our area because the old idea that you can teach people anything is a bit crazy, really, except skills. But if you want genuine transformation, the emphasis has to be on the partnership, I think, and the learner has to want to learn.
So arts education in particular, is this a particular, obviously you've come through with the speech and drama and that kind of side led to your in schools. How is that now informing your practice and informing what you do on a daily basis? I'm really fascinated by that scholar in residence and what your work is with QPAC.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is a long career, and in fact, what happened was I ended up as head of drama in a school, in a faculty of arts, which was subsequently put to death, and creative industries were born. And that's a whole talk in itself, really. What happened? I retired, I think.
You retired?
Yeah, I retired at about 48, I think, and said, I'm going to do other things. And I did do other things, and I was very successful at it. But I really missed the collegiality of the university. Universities are pretty amazing places. Well, they were. They're pretty tough these days. So I went back to university, and when I went back, I said to my then dean, "Have I got a job for myself?" And so really I created this job. I went to the head of the Performing Arts Centre and I said, "This is what I think I could do for you." And I said to the university, "This is what I think I could do for you." And I created this amazing job. And so let me tell you what the job is.
And when was that you did? When was this?
About 8 years ago.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I went back to the university and I was doing teaching, and I had enough of marking, really. Any teacher will tell you.
Teachers, I hear you.
Yeah. So I created this job, and it's been a process of working out what it means. So 2.5 days a week or thereof, and there's no cut delineation, I take my arts-based skills and I go into business and I earn a lot of money for the university. And I work with corporates, and I work on creativity and leadership and how you strategically influence and get change. in organisations.
Okay, so this is the leadership education side now. And was that the sort of beginning initial point of that leadership education focus in your work?
No, I had worked in this leadership area using a thing of, who knows Boal, Augusto Boal? So we had used Augusto Boal on a contract with a colleague of mine, Professor Brad Haseman. Some of the people will know Brad. He's a fabulous guy. And he and I developed this process called not the hypothetical, but the prophetical, where we used Boalian methods, and we worked with the Army, with the Defence Force, actually. These were people who were on major projects, and they needed to learn how to be creative and how to see into the future. And it was our drama skills that actually helped that. And so we'd had this major contract, and I'd worked on that for 10 years. And it was really then working with the Defence Force, and we'd done bits and pieces with education and with health. And we realised as arts makers that we had something quite unique, that we could actually, help people to learn by embodied learning, by being on their feet. So, for example, we have a contract currently with the Queensland Ambulance System, Queensland Ambulance Service, sorry. And last week we had 27 critical care paramedics singing 3-part harmonies. And then we theorised out of that around what does it mean to attune to another person.
Embodied learning, that's a wonderful point to go on and ask, how does that then, leadership education and embodied learning, and you're sitting on the boards with all of this on the board with a lot of people from the tourism industry and business, and there's this kind of, to me, a tension between the creative world and the business world. And tourism has a great focus on business. How do you fit into that boardroom, you know?
Well, again, it's interesting, you know, someone with an arts education background is not the person you would think, and yet my arts education skills are the very thing I found that have given me credibility and gravitas, and it's because we live in the experience economy, and those of us who understand aesthetics, who understand the sensory, that the sensory is absolutely critical to actually moving people, to actually connecting with people, engaging people, being able to move people in whatever sense you want to. This is the very skill that people need. And when you're able to articulate, when you're able to help them understand that these are the gifts that we have as arts makers and artists, and not just gifts but skills, you know, hardcore skills, then you all of a sudden you become influential.
Well, in TEQ and on that, I'm quite focused on this because I know we have a lot of events and festival managers in the room, so I really want to get into these questions. So understanding that and having those unique skills, then this is why then I'm suggesting possibly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is then why you're the chair of the events committee.
Well, yes, and a lot more. I guess at heart, I think being able to articulate and for us who make decisions, being able to look at organisations who have a clear sense of their purpose and a clear sense of connection with their audience, and have forward momentum. I'll give you some examples. There are some events that we have funded in the past, and they're fantastic events. You know, we've worked with them. We've used E-12. Who knows about E-12? Are there people in the room who know about that? So it's a wonderful opportunity if you get to be a TEQ proponent, that they will work with you counting backwards from your grant to the time of your event. And it's very, very useful in really opening up the dialogue. But this particular proponent that we went to, we said, okay, you're doing really well, but what are your plans for expansion? And they said, oh, we don't have any. It's just great the way it is. And that's okay. It's fantastic for them to have that festival, but it's not something that we can actually, our charter actually would not let us invest in that event.
Because they're not trying to grow it?
Because they're not trying to, not necessarily grow it in volume, but grow it in depth, or that there is stasis in an event. And so, and even before we go there, I thought it might be useful just to give you some thoughts around how the arts, I think, could play a role in actually contributing to deepening a lot of the festivals.
Great.
A lot of the festivals that I come across and see are festivals that are community-driven, fantastic, but tend to follow a pattern that is tested and true. And I understand that, because when you have volunteer organisations, you get, just getting the thing on can be really exhausting. And I take my hat off to small communities who no one pays them, they're building civic pride, they're fostering imagination in their town. So in no way is this meant to be a criticism. But we are siloed, and we don't tend to actually broker, or maybe we all need to get better, and I'm included in this, at actually being influential. And I hear, oh, but they won't engage, or we haven't been able to get them to the table. And, I'm speaking on behalf of my organisation. And on this leadership course that we've been talking, I've been encouraging people. They stand up and want to say, well, I want to speak for... No, you can only speak for yourself. And in organisations, if you're the one tasked to go and build relationships, then do it. And I think I consider myself more in the art world than anything else, and I think we do have a lot of looking inwards. We do have a lot of holding on to. And it takes real work and effort to build partnerships and collaborations. It's hugely. So I guess there's a challenge. I'm coming off the board in August, and I'm really looking forward to coming off the board. I'll have been on 9 years on the events board. And I've got lots to say that I can't say at this moment, and I've got lots of ideas that I'll be writing about in terms of how do we make those connections. We can't do it alone. We just can't.
And in order to be able to talk to people and groups and other organisations and governments and funders and businesses, we also need to have a sense of the intrinsic importance of the arts, festivals, events. We need to have a sense of that, a really solid sense of that, in order to then speak out. Would you be able to just inspire us and just tell us a bit about why you think the arts and culture are important? Why are festivals important? What is at the heart of this stuff? What is it all about?
Well, I'll stay on message for a moment and talk about why I think events are critical to destinations and to tourism. And particularly, what did Michael say? 2.9 visitors to Cairns. And you just have to drive around Cairns to know that this city really depends on tourists. So I suppose it became very clear to me when I was working in health, and I was travelling and I was taking workshops in Mackay, and I was staying in a motel, and these people who owned the motel were working incredibly hard, paying their taxes. And the next week I was in a major hospital in Brisbane where this incredibly expensive machine was. And I thought back to those people in Mackay and thought, those people have helped pay for that machine. And I suppose it's the joined-upness, really, that if tourism is the main way in which this economy lives, then as an artist, you have a responsibility to connect and to make that work as well. Now, I agree with you, Avril, that you have to have your purpose and your passion and but how is it that you connect to the economic growth of this community? So that would be the first question I would be asking myself.
So you're just to clarify for myself, I'm in conversation with you, so that's nice, isn't it? So you're saying that knowing that tourism is such a driver of the economy, going, well, that's where I need to actually look in my own future and take care of my own business of being an artist and connect in there with my culture, rather than thinking I've got a mandate because art is so important.
I think both.
Okay.
I think both. I wouldn't, I think the artist has a right and has a responsibility, if you're an artist, to pursue their craft. But I think you live in a situation, I think you live in a place, and I think there is an opportunity there. I know with another festival that is in a tourist town, they have very clearly, and I don't know if this is happening or not, but they have very clearly turned their gaze to how they can connect with hotels, with restaurants. They have really turned their gaze to that, and it has increased the capacity for artists to find work in that place.
Well, yes, I was talking with one of our young volunteers last night, thanks Charlie, and we were talking about the festival that just recently happened in Cairns and seeing how that the council had actually started to think differently about a festival and had opened up the Esplanade, and that really actually made the businesses thrive. So it was a kind of both a symbiotic sort of event happening that was paying artists and also making the tourist dollar go further, but also the local connection and local identity.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been to small towns where businesses have not played their part as well, where you've gone to there's been a festival on, it's been wonderful, and you've gone to get a cup of coffee and the coffee shop's been closed, and you say to the business owner the next day, what was going on here? There were hundreds, thousands of tourists in the town. Oh no, because there's some food stalls down there, so we closed, And so it is a partnership, and actually having the conversations, I think, around what values and what purpose both parties have, I think is critical.
Yes, well, I'm kind of looking towards the last, or one of the latter questions I have, because I do feel like there could be some questions in the audience that might be to come. But I would like to just turn to the sustainability of festivals, but there's an economic sustainability of festivals. Festivals it's difficult to run them, finance them and so forth, which is where this, tension between food vans and businesses and all of those complex dealings come in. But then there's also, I noticed that TEQ has a very strong governance focus on environmental and social sustainability. Would you be able to talk about what this means and why environmental sustainability and social sustainability are important for festivals and events?
Well, in this region, it's about water and reef, and the very reason that people come here. I mean, tourists. Tourists don't want to come somewhere that locals don't love living. Tourists don't want to come somewhere where the local art scene is not alive and vibrant. Tourists won't go to festivals except for, I guess, Coachella and Burning Man and those kind of festivals which have a real sense of themselves, and they have a critical mass anyway. So, I mean, the health and the sustainability of the community is equally in proportion to how people engage with the city. So, and the reef in particular, I mean, I don't even want to go there because I'm not skilled enough to talk about it. But I know that it's we have board members and we spend a lot of our time talking about the reef, and you've seen the money that the government has just given to increase care for the reef. So, I mean, it's just common sense, really. Yes,
and this social responsibility too, or the social aspect. What does the social sustainability mean? Yeah. And it's particularly in light of, the discussion on Saturday. A lot of us were at a workshop and facilitated by Judith for the Australia Council, and it was a lot of it was about ethics. So ethics, social responsibility, ethics.
Well, many of you will be aware of the research that talks about the disparity, when there's a wide disparity between wealth, how not only how unjust, but how it does not breed safety. It becomes a very unsafe place to be. And festivals are one way, I think, that people can actually take ownership of their city. I mean, if you look at the etymological roots of festival, it is actually they started with religion, and I guess depending on purpose, and you haven't asked me, but do I believe that festivals? I mean, everything's a festival these days.
Everything's a festival. Yeah, well, do we have too many?
Yeah, well, do we need to change the word? Do we need to find, you can have running festivals and marathons, and so we've certainly, the word has been colonised by sport, and I don't want to go into the sport argument, but it has been, so redefining the purpose and having a very strong purpose about, why you have a festival, I think is something we should do.
I really want to hone down on that ethics side of things, though. I'm just very interested in, so there's Somewheresville Something Special Festival, and there's the Something Special Festival, and it's been run every year annually for the last 50 years. And Something Special Festival, everyone comes to the Something Special Festival because there's something special, right? So you go to the Something Special Festival. But inside that Something Special Festival committee, there's a stasis that you talked about before, because this is a small town, this is Somewheresville. And the committee's been the same, it's stagnated, and there's a couple of people at the head of it, and they've always done it, and it's done this way, and we're doing it this way forever, if you don't mind. And there's a push away from locals, and there's a split in the community. And does it matter? Because everyone's coming to the Something Special Festival anyway, because it's something special.
Well, I guess it depends if they're taking public money. Because if they're taking money and it's really just hedonism on their part, then I would say it matters greatly, and they shouldn't be getting that money. Let them engage and enjoy. But if they are closed, if they've closed themselves off, then it is hedonism. And the Somewhere Festival perhaps need to do it in their own time, on their own money.
Mm-hmm. And how can, if there is that goodwill within the community to go, let's go to the Someone Special Festival and let's make it something that is socially responsible, that it does actually respond and reflect our own desire to participate in a meaningful way. Is there any guidance you can offer, or any pearls of wisdom, any thoughts?
Well, I suppose I put my TEQ hat on, you have to say if it's a major event, then we're going to look particularly at bed nights, and we're going to look particularly at the civic pride we're going to look at your business case, and often the business cases are very poor. And we're going to look at whether or not, what makes it a major event. Now, if we're going to even apply for a significant event, like the Mount Isa Rodeo is one that I've watched, and the Toowoomba Carnival of Flowers, they're events that I've watched in my 9 years go from quite small events to 3-year funded significant events. And the trajectory of those events is that they have professionalised. They have become conscious conscious that they need to talk to more than themselves. They've become conscious that they need to be able to inspire, talk about why their event does more than just excite the people in their town, that it has a larger reach, and that it is of significance. So the people in Somewhere Town weren't doing that. So when I get 2 applications to look at, when I see an application like the Mount Isa Rodeo, that I look at the numbers they're bringing in, I look at their reach, I look at their purpose, Somewhere Town is just not going to get funded. It's just not going to be competitive
Because it's evident.
Because I've been seeing this application come in every year with the same words, and sometimes I don't even have the year change. Sometimes they might even send me
the same application. So, look, just opening it up a little bit more for you to take the conversation in your own hands, but what are the contemporary issues around festivals, around events, and particularly how the arts and culture works in with events? What are those key issues around now or current issues?
Yeah, well, I mean, people would be aware of the shopping list festivals. You know, if you have lots of money and you can invite who you want, and so you go out and you pick the best artists or the best writers or the best dancers that you can, but in fact it has no connection back to community. It really just is a show-off shopping list. Those days are gone, you know, they're going, I would think, and I would hope. So the contemporary issues are: how does your festival develop, grow and sustain your community? How does it inspire your community? How is public value seen to? And how is capacity dealt with in terms of operations? How do we create festivals that don't kill the organisers that run them? How do we continue to professionalise and build the capacity and the skills of those people who give of their time freely? And how do we build sustainable relationships? Because out of all of that, that's the hardest one. Because people's personalities are the hardest things to deal with. Because we get into issues of power, and I worked so hard, I deserve to have a bigger say than you. And these are just the human things. So I guess, you know, that's one of the things that we've been talking about on the leadership program. We've been talking about how do you leave your baggage and your ego at the door and work for common good. And I know you do that in here because you're here in your own time, so I don't want to teach you how to suck lemons. But, you know, it's hard. It's hard work.
Thank you very much.
Arts Nexus is a capacity building agency working to grow creative people, communities and industries across far north Queensland. Find us at artsnexus.com.au, like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter and share your thoughts.